Welcome to Engaging ESG, the podcast that considers what it takes to get ESG communications right and how it can go oh so wrong. It's season 2 and we're back for more. Once again, we're looking at real-life examples of ESG messaging, some that will inspire and some that may make you cringe. I'm Jennifer Owens, Director of Marketing at Flow Carbon.
And I'm Kati Callens, Lead for Sustainability at Adobe. In this 11-part series, we're delving into the complexity of ESG comms, industry by industry. We'll highlight lessons learned and share practical tips you and your team can use today as you navigate the evolving landscape of environmental, social, and governance topics. Let's get started.
Welcome to episode 16. Could it be true? Is it real? Hello,
Yes.
Kati.
Hello. As a wise man once said,
Ooh.
"Oh, we're halfway there. Oh,
Living on a prayer. Yeah, I love it.
Welcome to the new karaoke podcast featuring Kati and Jen, where you thought you were getting ESG facts, but really you got to hear us out of tune on a Friday afternoon.
Ah, yes. Can we get auto-tune? Is that a sustainability thing? Is that something we're allowed to do?
We'll look into it. Maybe that's a season 3 feature. But yes, as the song denotes, today is our midpoint for season 2. It's moving real quick, and we've been having a ton of fun diving into different industries and how they're navigating sustainability and talking about the landscape. But today we're going to shift a little bit. We're going to transition from industry-specific discussions to just focus on one big overarching topic that touches each of these industries.
Oh, I know what it is. I know. It's just transition. So I know it's one of those phrases, say it all the time, vaguely understand what it means. I know there's, we talk about co-benefits and all of the projects we work on at Flow Carbon and things that we put into the sustainability report at Meta and about climate, the sustainability strategy. But I don't fully get it. I fully don't have an understanding. So I'm very glad to talk about the S in ESG.
Yeah, no, I think you are not alone with that. I think many of our listeners might not have heard the term just transition before, but it's the grounding framework of what we often think of as climate justice or environmental justice, which many more people have heard of.
Yes,
so just to get a little bit into the nitty gritty foundations, the Just Transition Network describes it as a principle, a process, and a practice.
Oh, truly, I love a 3 Ps. Bring it on.
3 Ps.
Love
but
alliteration.
Once again, does that tell us exactly what it is? It's kind of saying it's the water we're swimming in.
Yes.
But to dive into it a little bit more, they describe it as a vision-led, unifying, place-based set of principles, processes, and practices that build economic and political power to shift from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And that truly means approaching production and consumption cycles holistically and waste-free. And very important to note that this transition itself must be just and equitable, redressing past harms, creating new relationships of power for the future through reparations. And their belief is that if the process of transition is not just, the outcome will never be. So just transition describes both where we are going and how we get there.
That is interesting because you think about it's hard enough for us to think about production and consumption cycles that are holistic and waste-free and putting the conversations that we've had previously on circularity. But, to think about reparations and to think about what does it mean to put well-being in the center of the economy?
Right.
It really brings it all back together. So, okay, so tell me more. Circularity, that was a phrase that we spoke a lot in when we worked together and talking about how that all works. But how is the Just Transition framework built?
Yeah, so there's another great resource that we'll link to in the show notes by the Climate Justice Alliance that talks a little bit about the visuals of this framework and one of the kind of pieces around the history that they note, which I've heard a couple times, is that the strategies that we think of as just transition in this framework really are grounded in historical labor unions and
Oh.
environmental justice groups. Yeah. So rooted in low income communities of color
Mm-hmm.
who really saw the need to phase out the industries that were harming workers, community health, and the planet. And at the same time, provide just pathways for workers to transition to other jobs. So it was really rooted in workers defining a transition away from polluting industries in alliance with frontline and fence line communities. And what we think of as environmental justice movement really grew out of kind of the response to the system of environmental racism, where these communities of color and often low income communities have been, and quite frankly, continue to be
Yeah.
disproportionately exposed to and negatively impacted by hazardous pollution, industrial practices. And
Mm-hmm.
if that also sounds familiar when we think about kind of the history of the US and low income communities, communities of color, that's because many roots of environmental justice are rooted in the civil rights movement. And folks are, quick to point out that this can be sometimes in sharp contrast to the mainstream environmental movement, which often has failed to understand or address this
Yeah.
injustice. And a big piece of the EJ movement, which I think we can include climate justice in that a bit as well, really emphasizes not only what needs to be done, but how it needs to be done, which
Mm-hmm.
is truly a community based, bottoms up organizing process, really centering the voices of those most impacted and shared community leadership.
Yes, because it's the how and the what, but it's the who. And like
Mm-hmm.
who has a hand in it, who gets to say, which we've talked about in the shipping episode when we're saying, we
Mm-hmm.
can come in with these great ideas, but the small trucking fleet owners are saying, yeah, wait,
Yes.
this is hard on us. And you just replicate that over and over. And this makes me think of one of the things we were working on at Meta was around water stewardship. And we were
Mm-hmm.
working with one of our partner groups. And it was interesting because you say water stewardship, and I immediately go to there's not a lot of water and you're trying to conserve and the like. But then you go to communities like in Louisiana where water stewardship is keeping the water out in places that flood all the time. And that's the
Right.
thing of like, if you come in with one mindset of how something happens, you're missing what the community is telling you about their actual needs. So that's
Right.
fascinating.
Place based strategies, definitely not a one size fits all
Right.
approach, which can be hard when you want to scale solutions, right? But often we must ground ourselves in like, who are the communities that are being impacted? What are those unique challenges? And I think increasingly looking to community members for local knowledge,
Yeah.
ideas, but then also supporting them as
Sure.
well. So let's say, for example, right, like an organization is looking at their ESG
Yeah.
strategy or communications plan, trying to understand how it aligns with the just transition framework.
It's a
I think,
massive organization. I'm coming in. I want to do, I want to do water everywhere.
yes.
Like, so in that, how do you deal with that when you're going community by community?
Yeah. So I think there was another great kind of summary in this document that I mentioned earlier by the Climate Justice Alliance, where they kind of had a little bit of a listicle,
Nice.
so to speak. And as a millennial that grew up on Spark Notes, shout
Oh,
out to
Cliff
early
Notes.
internet.
Yes. It was printed because I'm old and I had Cliff
Right.
Notes.
Hey, all types of notes, right? Always helpful. So I think using this little checklist, and since
Okay.
we're episode 16, episode 6 of season 2, I thought that we could have like a top 6 what to look
Oh,
for.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So when an organization is thinking about how to integrate just transition into their sustainability and ESG work, 6 things to keep in mind. 1, a just transition must shift economic control to communities. 2, democratize wealth in the workplace. 3, advance ecological restoration. 4, drive social justice and social equity. 5, relocate most production and consumption. And 6, retain and restore cultures and traditions.
That seems super easy. Listicle works. This will be highly clickable. If we can add one more in publishing, odd numbers do better. So just a thought, maybe we can add another one on. So, but it does make this, I didn't know these 6 things would make the transition just. That would be your clickbait headline right there. So, so with just transition, I mean, my background before sustainability was working in the diversity space. And so a lot of it, if it counts this way, it was dealing with less about the communities and more about in terms of recruiting into companies and like the work that would be to go into underrepresented communities in your organization. And like, what would that take? What are the organizations you support? What do they need support with? Where are people gathered that aren't coming into your organization? And so that kind of mindset for the really progressive companies, that it's more than just saying, hey, we like Black women, we're going to hire, it's way more than that. You have to actually like make relationships. You have to show support. You have to listen to communities say, this is why we're not coming to your company. So that's as close as I've gotten into this world of just transition.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good call out, because it's not just getting, diversity hires into companies, but then also like, what support do they have once they're in those organizations, right? Like, it's great to get up those numbers or whatever, but if they don't feel like there is a cultural understanding of what they need or the communities, there's a lot of ways that like good intentions cannot actually be.
Which it's weird to say recruitment is a vanity number, but yeah, you can interview a whole bunch of people. It doesn't count.
Totally.
It's just one number.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it makes sense to me that you haven't seen a lot of just transition language in the work that you've done in the past. I was like originally made familiar with the concept of just transition when I was working in the government space. I think it's terminology that is used a little bit more in the public sector than the private sector, although that's shifting, which I will talk about a little bit later. And also one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it today.
Yeah.
So I started my career at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I was actually fortunate enough to work on an environmental justice grant program that focused on water quality and stewardship. And there was a lot of tenets of the just transition framework as essential criteria for how we vetted our community-based grantees. And quite frankly, it was the first time that I had encountered the idea of kind of the importance of having a strong tie to community institutions as a prerequisite to helping sustain a project long term. And it made a lot of sense to me as someone who was coming into my first post-college big job at the government, and seeing also that there was flagrant examples of how the government is not great at supporting communities of color. Natural disasters, for example, like Hurricane Katrina, and redlining communities towards industrial pollution sites. And so it was this interesting mix of the EPA having this grant program and saying, hey, we like really do care about these issues and we want to put money towards it.
Hey guys,
but also we know you don't trust us.
Yeah.
And so it was like it was a rebuilding of trust, of faith. And one of the requirements for the grant program was that folks had to kind of talk about the environmental justice cleanup or project they wanted to do in their community and demonstrate how they were linked to local churches, other local institutions, and really that whoever was applying for the grant wasn't just like swooping in, like that they had talked to business leaders, community leaders, demonstrated a need, and that there was going to be future support. So I was pretty impressed by that.
Yeah.
And it clearly made an impact on me. And it's been a decade since I was at EPA, and I've seen a lot more talk of environmental justice and climate justice in corporate programs. But the concept of just transition was something that I hadn't really seen in programming until late 2023, last year, where I had the honor of attending the first ever APEC, which stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, multi-stakeholder forum
Sure.
focused on just transition. They love a short title.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
And so within my current role at Adobe, we were invited as one of the corporate partners, but mostly it was just a pretty big learning journey for me to see how this concept of just transition, which I think has lived a little bit more in the community public sector space, is starting to move into private sector.
Yeah.
But before I jump into that, I do feel like I have some fun stats for you about
Cool.
APEC, which were things that I didn't actually know beforehand as well.
Great. Bring them on.
So
I love a stat.
APEC, yes, stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It's an intergovernmental forum of 21 member economies on the Pacific Rim, started in 1989. And originally to promote free trade, but now the group focuses on multilateral agreements from everything from sustainable development to COVID-19. Did you know that APEC represents more than 60% of global GDP?
No, I did not.
Their collective membership contributes 65% of global carbon emissions.
I totally knew that. I didn't know.
Or that it contains 6 out of the top 10 largest carbon economies, and also 12 of the 20 most vulnerable countries to climate change.
Now that tracks. They are literally the Pacific Rim. And so
Yes.
with rising oceans, I will buy that. Did not know it. I have to think about this whole carbon emitting part of it, because you do think it's just us and we are a big, big problem in the US, but it's constant reminder of, it's like in the movies where there's like some UFO or monster movie, something awful's happened. It always seems just happening in New York.
Right.
What was happening over in the other part of the country or the world? So yes. Oh, that's interesting. No, I did not know any of that.
Yeah. And so I think with that context, right, there was a lot of different kind of key stakeholders at this Just Transition Forum.
Yeah.
And the timing was also quite interesting because it was just a month ahead of COP28, which is the big climate change conference we talked about in episode 11 at the beginning of season 2.
Do they think we're ignoring them though? Because we much like not listening to communities, we will often not listen to other countries. So
totally.
How do they view this whole conversation?
Yeah, so the conversation was an interesting mix because there were founders, there were executives, academics, indigenous leaders, community members, political representatives. I think everyone was just glad to see more of a call out around climate. I think traditionally APEC has been a collaborative intergovernmental body for just trade for trade's sake. And increasingly, as we're seeing on the global stage for all these different stakeholder groups, both public and private, it is you can't ignore the climate crisis and the impacts that it's having on, you guessed it, supply chains, which are heavily based in Asia. And also, many of the intense weather events that are happening. And so I think there was just a lot of expression that people were really happy that this was kind of making it to center stage. Maybe Biden wasn't talking about it at the end of the APEC forum, but I think it really highlighted for me how sometimes we just think about a lot of the work of companies around reducing their own greenhouse gas footprint or water. And so much of this conversation was about community. Yeah. And there was a lot of integration and overlap too. I think that's something that I found really impressive. So they talked about sustainable developments, but they also talked about STEM education for women and girls. They talked about innovation. They talked about a lot about inclusivity. So to your point around, there's a lot of small island communities that were part of this forum. There was a professor, kind of academic from the Institute of Human Rights, who stated, there's a couple quotes that I have here just from my notes. Haley St. Dennis noted, there's no value of just transition until all voices are heard. Dr. Sarasa Kantan, I'm going to butcher this, Kantarala Kantalkul from the University of Bangkok noted, there's no effort that is too light, no community that is too small. Now, there's island nations that were being represented that are really gearing oceans rising from climate change. And there was just a lot of overlap around human rights and
Yeah.
how that integrates with climate change. And there was one, I think, pinnacle quote that really stuck with me after the event, which was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Oh, that's nice. That's clear. It's concise. I like it. I take it from a council
Yeah.
perspective. I like it because it seems that this is like, I think the word that comes to mind in this season for us is omnibus. Like everything we're talking about is multifaceted. And
Yes.
so if you're talking every community, you think, oh, how much time is that going to take us to talk to every community? But you're completely right. It's not going to happen if we don't all do it together.
Yeah. And I do think some of these governmental groups, they try to balance inclusivity with action, and that is a struggle. But when you see the varied challenges around sustainable development across Pacific Rim countries, it really makes it clear that it's not optional. It needs to be done in a just way.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just a lot of note of hope. And I was really happy too to see that there was Indigenous leaders involved in this, because that is really important. They have such an important connection to the land. And yeah, those folks came from New Zealand, where they have a strong Indigenous support and community. So that was great. One last thing on the Just Transition APEC forum that I wanted to call out, since we're mostly talking about business, is that even though there was a lot of academics and NGOs and think tank folks, there was also a couple of innovative startups that were featured. And not only for their sustainable business model, but also some of them had pretty strong communications and marketing.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. What did you see?
Yeah. So there's this startup in the vertical farming space called Plenty. And one of the notable quotes that I wrote down as well was from their CEO, Arma Kutai, who said, "People go where they are needed and people stay where they are valued."
That's very true.
Which really hit me. Yeah. And so it's clear that, so Plenty is a vertical farming company, and they were highlighted because they not only pair innovative farming practices, but also they really focus on the community benefit. So in early 2023, they opened up the West Coast's only commercial scale vertical farm in Compton, California, that grows up to 4.5 million pounds of produce annually that supplies partners in Walmart, Whole Foods, Bristol Farms. And yeah, I was doing a bit of research on them and saw in a press release with the Compton mayor, Emma Sharif, was really, highlighting the company's investment in her community, noting that the Plenty Compton farm is bringing field scale farming back to Compton and introducing a new generation of our community to careers in agriculture. And more than 30% of the farm's hires came from our city. And so she spoke highly of not only their hiring practices, but also having the farm local increases access to fresh, locally grown food for urban populations while supporting our city's economic development.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That really is putting well-being at the center. That's something that I'm learning about in a course I'm taking, that when you do that, what happens? When you truly put, so here you have the importance of community investment, economic empowerment. That's what's part of the ESG. That's what we're supposed to all be talking about. And then what happens if you actually put that in the middle? And then what happens when you're actually talking about it and then building something? I mean, much like what they're saying, like you are now attracted by what they're putting out there. Because the people go where they're needed and they stay where they're valued. That also goes with your comms too, right? You'll follow someone because you need the information or you're interested, but you'll stay because you're valued. You become part of a community.
Completely. And their focus on community as well as sustainable practices around farming was really highlighted, and quite frankly, some very compelling storytelling they had. They shared some videos, which I saw later on Instagram, a really fun mix of infographic, I love a catchy tune.
Oh, yeah.
And some sustainability facts that they kind of squeeze in for good measure. So we know that audio is not a great format for highlighting video. So we'll throw those links into the Instagram
What?
account. But yeah, I think there's this interesting concept of how do you communicate value in these like quippy ways? And of course, we talk a lot about CSR reports and the like, but as someone who is interested in this work, I now, when I go into Whole Foods, I'm like looking at Plenty and thinking like, wow, I know more about their story. It maybe
Yeah.
is a little bit pricier, but I do want to kind of support the social benefits.
This is the
of
community I
just
want to be part
transition.
of. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great.
totally. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving fast
Okay.
here because
All
I'm
right. All
realizing
right.
we could
All
talk
right.
about this all day. So that was in late 2023. And then I'm just going to scooch us up to early 2024.
This is
And just
breaking
last
news.
breaking news. And I was just at GreenBiz conference in Phoenix last week and was really excited to see Just Transition was on the plenary agenda.
Ah, that's amazing. You're making me think of the Devil Wears Prada when Meryl Streep gives that speech about like, why are you wearing that blue sweater? It's because 10 years ago, so-and-so had a fashion show where they used that blue and then it went all the way through. This is the same thing with the way we all get into a concept is like 10 years ago, and I'm sure it was earlier, but say 10 years ago, the Environmental Protection Agency starts saying, how can we seed this idea? What can we do to support? And then it just starts to grow and the roots grow. And then the advocates and the NGOs come in and then the corporates grow. And now you're sitting at a large conference with 1,000 people all talking about it. I love it.
Completely. Yeah. Well, and that actually dovetails great into this keynote session that I wanted to highlight because the speakers really, I think, identify what a range of people are now talking about just transition. So we had Wawu Gathuru, who is a founder of Black Girl Environmentalist, and Derek Johnson, who is the president of the NAACP. So we have this like amazing, inspirational Gen Z founder who is hot on social media and kind of creating this environment to get Black women into sustainability and climate roles. And then we have the NAACP, like such an amazing, historic, civil rights organization. And they're both up on stage and talking, quite frankly, about what it looks like for businesses to authentically work towards a just transition and move once again extractive to regenerative economy, and hearing them address the need to give opportunities to those who are deserving, no matter their zip code, was really incredibly powerful. And they really drove the message of how integral just transition is to conversations about the evolving world of sustainability. And as we've discussed before, we're in this time of kind of redefining ESG. What does it mean for the community? How are we communicating about it? And so they highlighted this kind of transition point for the industry as an incredibly important moment for us to talk more about equity, inclusivity, is as we shift the narrative and the conversation about what ESG strategy means moving forward.
Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. It's the blue sweater.
It's the blue sweater. And it dovetailed on, I think, another interesting concept that kept coming up at GreenBiz, which is they talked about this concept of climate quitting.
Ooh.
Employees quitting organizations that do not have sustainability or ESG strategies. And
good. I was hoping it didn't mean we were quitting on working on the climate.
No, good question. No, it just we're done. No, yeah, the idea that like a company's ESG goals are integral to hiring, retaining top talent. And one of the stats that Wawa shared was that by 2025, Gen Z will be 27% of the workforce.
Oh my God. So yes, I'm not even, I think my daughter is like the end of Gen Z and my son is whatever's next. Does it just start? Is it Gen A? I don't, what happens?
Generation Alpha. Yeah. I think
is that what it is? Oh my gosh. I was just guessing, but they are very, they haven't gotten into the world of actually having to support themselves yet. So I don't know that they're judging companies on that, but they are paying attention to it all. They're very informed because they're surrounded by information coming to them at all points. And in the idea of getting away from consumerism, my girl is a thrift store connoisseur.
Amazing.
Yeah. there's a group that's like, setting up like, what should our consumering be? And it's like, you should only buy 3 apparel or footwear items a year. And I was like, I could probably swing that. She totally, like, that are new. She totally does that world.
That's great. And I think when we think about the concept of just transition, it perfectly aligns with not just what consumers, your kids, and all of us, quite frankly, the incoming generation of buyers looking for, but also this younger workforce. So I'll just end my kind of overview about Green Biz by mentioning that I had the pleasure of participating in an employee engagement panel representing Adobe alongside colleagues with Microsoft and LinkedIn. And there was a couple more stats that I was finding out through this work, which is there was a recent Future of Jobs is Green report by the World Economic Forum in 2023. And this report found that 20% of employees say that sustainability is their top non-negotiable for a new employer. And Deloitte had a report on Gen Z and millennials and said that 42% of young workers have changed or plan to change jobs or industries due to climate concerns. And 50% are pushing their employer to drive change on environmental issues. So in short, an increasing number of people want to work for companies that are serious about sustainability, and they want to play an active part, even if it isn't in their job description.
I just had the live part of my class yesterday, and a young woman spoke, and she was saying that in her company, she was dealing with boomers and Gen X who are like, business as usual. This is how we have to do it. Basically painting my generation and above, who do not like to be tied to the boomers, by the way. Tip to the wise, young woman. And that, but, like climate issues. It's like they're she was saying, much more comfortable with incremental change. And then the Gen Z coming into the workplace were like, burn it all down in the name of climate is basically setting it up that the millennials are the only smart people in the room. But it's interesting that I was a little irked because I am Gen X and we get irked by everything, but that it does become tiring after a while. Like, that's why you need new generations to come in and raise new points and to push harder. And then Gen X, I went to see Billy Bragg like a year ago or so, and he's one of my favorite guys, and he's singing all his There's Power in a Union and all his great songs. And he stops in the middle of the concert to basically say, hey, all of you who are my age, here's the thing. Yes, we did grow. Yes, we did bring change, but now there's more change to be done. And either you're going to keep evolving or get out of the way. And I was like, thank you, Billy. So that's a thing for all of us, is that we've got to keep changing and we've got to get out of the way, which is something when we're listening to other communities in the ESG work that we do. I think we just constantly, I'm speaking to my fellow Gen Xers, like constantly reconsider what's our hesitation there? Or are we talking to all the communities? Are we doing, how loud and proud do we want to get? And can we do it? Am I about to create the first anti-green hushing chant? I like it. So, no, I'm not doing TikTok. I'm just not. That's the line I draw.
Anything that you want to say on this topic, if you compare it with the Texas Hold'em line dance right now, I think you have a fighting chance.
Is that what'll make it work?
Just transition into country has really captured everyone. So I think we might be onto something. This could be the Gen X crossover to Gen Z if we could do some green hushing line dancing.
Oh, okay. Because, all I had to do in my day was just do a listicle and we were good.
Exactly. It's gotten a little bit more interactive in this realm, but
yeah.
Yep. So that was our deep dive into just transition. Hope that you learned a couple things, Jen, alongside our listeners.
Oh, I totally did. Bring it on.
Awesome. Great. Well, next time we're going to be driving into the automotive sector. But before then, we'd love to hear what listeners are thinking about this episode. It's a kind of a departure from our regular industry specific cadence into a topic. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it a refreshing palate cleanser? Let us know. Your feedback really helps us keep y'all engaged and ensuring that we're making content that is relevant and useful as you think about integrating into your work.
For sure. So shoot us a note at engagingesg@gmail.com. And thank you again for joining us. And as always, keep engaging. Thank you for joining us on Engaging ESG. Have a question for us to consider or a strategy you'd like us to cover? Email us today at engagingesg@gmail.com.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Engaging ESG today. It helps us grow, and even better, be sure to share the podcast with your favorite sustainability, diversity, or social impact colleague. And until next time, keep engaging.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.